Wow, we're live. Okay, welcome back to the podcast, episode 8, Emma Part 2. I'm here with my friend Maggie. I'm Kristen.
Hi, everyone.
We're your first impressions podcasters, and we're here to rock your world with our discussion of Emma. I have been drinking all day, so this will get funnier earlier than usual. Hopefully.
Yes, Kristen is already drunk, and I am here with my champagne that was gifted to me for my birthday a few weeks ago, and my Girl Scout cookies. So we are ready to party.
We are classy as all heck, and this is another podcast being recorded over Google Hangouts on Air, which means it will be available via the YouTube channel. If you just go to the YouTube, the First Impressions podcast YouTube page, you can watch it if you prefer to see us talking.
You should tell them why we are once again recording remotely.
Once again, so I'm sick. I woke up sick, and I've been very non-productive today. But I feel well enough to podcast. Like I always feel well enough to talk about Jane Austen. But that's why I've been drinking all day, is because I was telling Maggie I can't eat. So like all I want is the calories, like the sugar rush, right? You know, like science and all that shiz, you know. So, so yeah. So
there's one thing we need. It's more calories.
Well, that's right. That's right. And and I'm like in a weird head, like I'm so emotional, like I'm like in a weird headspace.
You sound really high. Actually, it's funny.
I like when I have 2 glasses of wine and like anything can make me cry. Like you talk about, oh, that puppy's so cute. I'm like, oh my God, you're right. So I was listening to music, and my favorite artist, Sufjan Stevens, came on. It was my favorite song of all time, Chicago. And I was in the living room, and I was like, it's so beautiful. So this is going to be an interesting one.
So when we talk about Emma and Mr. Knightley's relationship, Kristen is just going to devolve into a puddle of goo in her tears and wine.
Well, I don't want to be too frank, but I think there are some really interesting things to say about that relationship. But first, let me just quickly thank all of the fans again. And I want to give a special shout out to someone who actually emailed us for the first time. We got fans.
Yay! We got fan mail. Like questions. Yay. It was so great.
I did not ask him if I could say his name, so I guess I'll check with him about, okay. His first initial is I. So thank you, Mr. I.
It's like reading a letter.
Mr. E. It's like Mr. E. This person is clearly like educated in English literature. Like I haven't asked. We've traded like a bunch of emails, but I have not asked him his background. But he's always like dropping knowledge. Like he's like, read these scholarly essays on JSTOR, and we need to talk about reader response theory. And we've been talking about the Davies adaptations, and I have to say it was a good reminder for me not to, because I said some unkind things about the Davies Sense and Sensibility and the Davies Emma, and I have to remember some people may have liked those movies. And we also talked about Metropolitan and Whit Stillman, and maybe we'll talk about that later.
But do you think it's possible that Mr. I is actually a pseudonym that Kevin has adopted because he knows how much you love Austen? So you're actually conducting this entire secret scholarly discussion with your own husband.
No, because I have not been sexually harassed by Mr. I, and I think Kevin would pretty much take the opportunity. We're apart right now. My husband is in Boise, Idaho right now, and the long distance sexual harassment has already begun.
I would say Kevin would have opened with that. That would have been like Kevin's opening salvo, right? I really love the podcast. Your tits look amazing on the YouTube channel. Okay. So thank you very much to Mr. I. We really appreciate your emails and your brilliant commentary on the books. And thank you to everyone who has contacted us through our Facebook page, which we have a Facebook page.
Yay, Facebook page.
Yay. It's called First Impressions obvi. And we also have a question, which we'll get to, I guess, at the end of this podcast. We had our first question. We kind of touched on it in our previous episode, but it's worth visiting again. There is a bit of lag time between when we record these and when they go live. So that's why, we were saying that we first got our emails, but it's been several weeks. It takes a long time to edit and post them. So that's why we kind of have a bit of lag time. But we are very grateful for everyone who's contacted us. It's really appreciated.
That's right. Thank you very much. And
so let's get to it, Kristen. I'm ready.
Yeah.
Let's do this.
Without further ado. So this entire episode, or a large portion of it, we will devote to talking specifically about Emma and Knightley and how we feel about their relationship.
Knightley?
Oh, yes.
Knightley.
Never even seen him before. And she called him Knightley.
I think you mean Mr. Knightley.
Mr. Knightley.
No, wait, he's George, right? John is George. His brother.
Had not you call me George? Like, that's the question. He's like saying at the end, he's like, Emma, don't call me Mr. Knightley anymore. You've called me Mr. Knightley since you were a child. It's weird. And she's like, I can only ever call you Mr. Knightley. I can't even promise.
Let me tell you what's weird. He's 16 years older than her?
Yes.
Which, when you reach a certain age, that type of age difference doesn't really matter.
No.
But he talks about her a lot when she was a little girl, and it's creepy.
Well, we should talk about that. But you're right. Like she said, I cannot even promise to equal the elegant terseness of Mrs. Elton and call you Mr. K. Because remember, Mrs. Elton calls her husband Mr. E.
Yeah.
And she's like, you'll always be Mr. Knightley to me. And I think that's sweet, but also, I mean, this is why we have to talk about the relationship. This is why we have to take an hour to talk about it, because I don't want to be like inappropriate. Like we need to talk about the sexuality of this on a very academic level. So please understand that we're not accusing Knightley of like pedophilia or anything.
No, I don't think anybody.
Okay, hopefully. I mean, well, I don't know. There was that one time we went to that book club. I don't know. Remember that whole thing?
No. What? What?
We read this like scholarly text about like Shirley Temple and the male gaze, and like someone was like,
oh right, was it coddling? Was kind of, I don't know. Anyway, but that's not what I mean. Clearly, that is not what's happening here.
Well, and there's this unfortunate like joke he makes where and it's obviously a joke, but I mean, you have to understand. We have to understand, because what I was going to talk about, is there's a modern concept of daddy issues. Okay. Yeah. Right. So women are attracted to men. So Knightley is, to use another very modern term, he really is a condescending mansplainer. I mean, he takes Emma to task every time she does something that he does not agree with.
Well, he is the only one who can see her faults, and the only one who will call her out on it, right? Yes,
and he plays a very valuable role in his life. And vice versa. He guides her, and but as I was saying last time, unlike an Edmund Fanny Price relationship, he's trying to guide her, and she's constantly challenging him and breaking out of the molds that he's trying to set for her in the path he's trying to lay forward for her, and that's why we can feel okay. I mean, all right, spoilers. That's why we can feel okay about this, because at the end of the day, they are intellectual equals. They fight. They both hold their own, and they. It's no longer like an older brother relationship or a guardian child relationship. She's grown up enough so that she can really hold her own, and that's where the electricity and the chemistry comes in. But
I think it's clear that the relationship evolves through the course of the novel, and they definitely have the whole witty banter thing going on. When they do fight, it's not really at least on Emma's part, it's not really fighting. It's just she says that, with Miss Taylor gone, Mrs. Weston, there's no one who is her intellectual equal for her to converse with. So with Knightley, it's definitely this just kind of witty banter. She just enjoys kind of playing the devil's advocate with him. Even if it's something she doesn't necessarily feel strongly about, she likes arguing with him. It's their way of flirting, basically.
It is. I mean, it is. And let's go back to the very beginning. And there's a passage you wanted to talk about that I think ties in for the, we'll talk about this chronologically. So we'll sort of develop their relationship and see how we feel about it. But at the very beginning, there was what happens when Miss Taylor gets married.
So what we're going to talk about first it's kind of a tangent, if you will, from the Emma and Knightley relationship, but it's something that it struck me. The book opens with Miss Taylor becoming Mrs. Weston. And we basically meet Emma right during and right after the wedding. And it's something that I think that Austen really nails about our emotions as people. And obviously this is a theme throughout our entire podcast, is that the people and characters and social situations that Austen describes are relevant even now. And Emma is torn emotionally when Miss Taylor gets married. On one hand, she is, of course, very happy for her dear friend to have found happiness with a partner. She's also really bummed because her best friend will no longer be living with her, is starting a whole new life without her. And even though she's only moving half a mile down the road, it's completely changing Emma's life. And this is something that really resonated with me because let me just tell you, I've been to many weddings. I have been involved with many weddings. I've been a bridesmaid, like, I don't know, 7 times or something. But you always do have this sense of joy for the couple, also tempered with some sadness because your relationship with the person who you've known is never going to be the same. And Emma really embodies that. She's torn between tears and joy. What is it? Tears and joy?
And smiles or something?
Yeah, something like that. And it's really beautiful. And I think it really and it also starts off by humanizing Emma, to me, right off the bat. We talked a lot in our last episode about how Emma in part 1 is very difficult to like. She is very spoiled. But she has very true emotions that I was able to relate to.
And there's a tie-in. Oh, sorry.
Go ahead. It's fine.
I was just going to say, if you were going to say something else, because I was going to say then that's the tie-in to Knightley, because she goes home, her governess no longer lives with her, which means she and her father are going to spend all their nights together and all their time together, and he cannot meet her in conversation, rational or playful. He's just got the mind of kind of a childlike mind. And it's to borrow a phrase from Northanger Abbey, it's a picture of intellectual poverty. I mean, her talents are wasted on a guy who can't appreciate them. And then what happens? Knightley walks in and he brightens up their lives, and she realizes he'll still be there for her. And that's the tone.
I was telling Bay earlier today that I work at home 3 times during the week. I'm very extroverted, in case you weren't able to tell. I'm very extroverted, and I work at home 3 days a week. And I worked today doing some overtime most of the day, which means I didn't really leave the house. When I don't get to see people or interact with people, I can get really weird and feel really isolated. And so he's shaking his head, nodding. And so, I feel for Emma. I've been a caretaker for a parent. Obviously, her father's not completely decrepit, but he is very much a silly person in the whole Austen tradition.
Yeah.
And so she must feel very isolated being just the two of them. I mean, of course, they have a whole house staff, but, it's still different when you don't get to see and interact and talk. And it's not like you can just turn on the television, right? It's not an option.
And that kind of depth of friendship, of course, they don't have a very large social circle anyway, because they only can hang out with other landed gentry and the clergy or whatever.
Right. And despite the fact that Mrs. Weston moves half a mile away, when they get an inch of snow on Christmas, when they're at the party, it's a real threat that they might actually be snowed in half a mile away.
Yeah, exactly. So that's what we have to talk about next. So I'm really glad you bring that up, because then.
Well, you're welcome, Kristen.
Yeah, you're brilliant. You're a genius podcaster. The next thing that I was this sort of out of chronological order, but to build their relationship, to lay the groundwork of their relationship, what we observe through Austen's, narration is that I don't know if you've ever had this kind of relationship with somebody before, where You are absolutely so in tune with them that when something is going down, you just look at each other and you both know what has to be done. And that Knightley, and remember that Mr. Knightley and Emma are brother and sister-in-law. So when the extended family gets together, Emma's father gets into these conversations with Emma's sister. Now, Emma's sister is also a hypochondriac. So then they start trying this one-upsmanship, which still happens at Thanksgivings all over the country, of who knows more about your health and like what crazy trend. And so the father and the sister start like putting each other, like sort of like throwing shade on each other's doctors. Like, no, my doctor knows better. No, my doctor knows better. And there's this amazingly written.
You shouldn't have gone to the sea. That was crazy. Why would you ever go to Brighton? It's so like you're going to get sick. Oh, no, he assured us it would be fine. It was this big, long thing about whether they should go to the sea or not.
And it's step by step. Emma and Mr. Knightley can see step by step that this is about to go off the cliff, and they know exactly where it's going. And John Knightley is there. Mr. Knightley is George Knightley. So his younger brother, who is married to Emma's older sister, this guy, there's such a great way of describing it. He has a bad temper. He really does respect his father-in-law. He really does want to get along with everybody, but he's just bad tempers. He has faults of temper. And so he has said sharp things or unkind things to both his wife, Isabella, Emma's sister, and to Emma's father. He has sort of sharply reprimanded them for trying to like physic him, as he says, to try and take care of his health. And so this has happened often enough that Emma and Mr. Knightley are just sitting there getting more and more and more tense because they can see it coming. And it's put this way, and this is so real to me. They always, whenever they were hanging out with this group of people, they always had to be nervous. They always had to fear the offense, though the offense came not. Like they had seen it happen once or twice before, so they were always like, oh, that can't happen again. We can't let John Knightley upset
This
Mr.
is
Woodhouse.
basically a perfect example, and not even example, this is a perfect summing up of how we all feel when we visit our families for the holidays, because they always come over the holidays.
Yes.
So think about, like, you could be married to the most rational, level-headed person, but when he gets around his in-laws, they just push him to the edge, and he just says something, and then everyone remember 2 Christmases ago when John lost it. I mean, it's just a perfect example of how Austen's characters could just be transplanted right into our lives and we would know them.
Absolutely. And she also is a master of like detailing everyday conversation. So what she does is she has both Emma and, Mr. Knightley, George Knightley, break in at various points in this conversation when they see it's going off the rails, and they both guide it to different subjects, and it's done so deftly, and that they're doing a choreographed dance of we won't let this happen, and they're on the exact same wavelength about it, and that's that kind of deep connection and that kind of intellectual and both understanding at the same level, I think is what's so striking about it. And then it's exactly as you said, the next thing that happens is that they go to Mr. and Mrs. Weston's for Christmas.
I loved this scene, by the way.
Yes.
When we're talking, because you want to root for Emma and Mr. Knightley, right? I mean, you want to root for the hero, the heroine and the hero to work it out. And this was just a great example of them working in tandem, being on the exact same wavelength, him being such a gentleman. And I don't know, it was just, I thought it was really, really a really sweet scene. So I assume you're going to describe it for everyone.
No, why don't you describe it?
Oh, okay. Don't mind if I do. So all of the characters that we know and love at this point have now gone to Mr. and Mrs. Weston's for a Christmas Eve party. And Emma's father, who is anxiety-ridden on a beautiful sunny day in June, is, of course, nervous about the weather because it looks like it could snow. So they all get there. They're having a very nice time. They calm him down. He's happy. I forget who it is who leaves the room but comes back and reports it has started snowing. So, of course, Mr. Woodhouse immediately starts panicking. We're going to be trapped here. We're not going to be able to get home. What are we going to do? Even if we ordered the carriage right now, there's not a guarantee we'd be able to get home. While all this is going on, George Knightley has surreptitiously left the room Emma's trying to calm her father down. She and Knightley exchanged looks right before he left. Long story short, too late. He comes back. He has already ordered the carriage. Everything is taken care of. Mr. Woodhouse can go right into the carriage and go right home, no problem. And it's just this amazing moment where the two of them shared just a glance and communicated all of this, and he went and took care of it all.
I'll read the passage.
It was just, I thought it was beautiful.
It is beautiful. I mean, you get the sense even in the brevity of the writing, you get the sense of their relationship. And he walks all the way out to the main road, and he comes back and he's like, "There's just a little bit of snow. It's cool." And then he's
like when we had the blizzard. He's the person who will like walk out to the main street and be like, "Can we get out in the car? How much shoveling?"
Yeah, because right? I mean, everybody else at the party is like urging or recommending based on what they want to do. Like Mr. Weston's like, "No, it's fine, stay." And John Knightley, who only cares about hanging out with his wife and kids, is like, "Oh, I hate, we got to go right now. We can't be stuck
I'm not getting snowed in here with these people."
And so Mr. Knight, it says, while the others were variously urging and recommending, Mr. Knightley and Emma settled it in a few brief sentences, thus: "Your father will not be easy. Why do not you go? I am ready if the others are. Shall I ring the bell? Yes, do." So they have like this, "You're going to go, right? Yeah. Let's make, and they make it happen. And it's
they get shit done, which I personally appreciate.
Yeah, right. They don't need. Sorry, I kind of talked over what did you just say?
I just said they get shit done, and I like that.
Yeah. Yes.
That's the way I try to live my life, And that's so when I see that kind of cooperation, it makes my little type A heart happy.
And that's something you can that's a foundation for happiness for sure. And that's what side tangent, that's when Emma goes home with Mr. Elton.
Oh Lord.
He's drunk, and you said something so funny to me earlier today.
Because I think everyone needs to understand, Kristen and I, basically every interaction we have of each other references Austen in some way. I'm not kidding. She'll just randomly quote things to me. Like we were texting earlier to decide the time we were going to meet. So she was sending me Emma texts about her sore throat. So I think I said something like, if she doesn't show up, Mr. Elton will propose to me and I'll have to slap his ass right out of the carriage. That's basically, I mean, that's the modern version of what Emma does. She just kind of shoots him down. Yeah. Completely.
Wouldn't be ladylike to slap him, but she totally would have. She slaps him. So the next thing that we do need to talk about this disagreement they have, though, about Robert Martin and Harriet Smith.
Yes. And but you mean Emma and Mr. Knightley. They basically, I think, have two main disagreements during the course of the novel. And they both happen within the first third.
There's something so beautiful before this all even goes down. There's something that encapsulates their relationship. There are two of these moments, I think, that encapsulate their relationship perfectly, of this sort of annoying older brother who's always finding fault and giving her advice, and the young woman who's trying to break free and be her own person and be like, "No, I'm just as smart as you." And
cue the Ariana Grande song, right?
Which one?
Is it called Break Free? I'm not going to sing it, Kristen.
Okay.
This is the part when I say I don't wanna, I'm stronger than I. You know that one?
I know that one.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So Emma sings that, and she does her pop and lock routine, and she wears her kitten ears like Ariana. And but remember, she's drawing Harriet, right? Harriet poses for a portrait, and Emma is drawing her. And Mr. Elton, who's trying to woo Emma, is slobbering all over this painting. "Oh, it's so perfect. It's so good. It's so great. It's amazing. You're so
actually a really, really good way of putting it."
He's slobbering all over it. And Knightley is standing behind Emma, and he just says, "You have made her too tall, Emma." Yeah. And then the next line is, which I love to 1,000 pieces. The next line is, "Emma knew that she had, but would not own it." love it so much.
My favorite part of this podcast is when Kristen says something that she finds hilarious and then laughs for like a full 30 seconds.
And I have to say, Emma is a comic creation, and there are so many parts that when I read them now, I laugh out loud. But we'll talk about, so let's move into talking about Robert Martin and Harriet Smith. And remember, the disagreement between them is that Emma wants Harriet to marry Mr. Elton. And she's trying to get that worked out. When in the meantime, Robert Martin proposes to Harriet, and he's Mr. Knightley's tenant. So he's a farmer. He's not genteel. Right. So then Knightley figures out that what's Emma is up to. And that's where they have the scene with the shooting arrows. And
in the movie.
In the movie,
with Gwyneth.
He explains to her, he's like, oh, you know, but he's right. He's just really condescending in his manner.
Well, here's the thing. I feel like one of the things I really enjoy about their interactions is that usually they are both right in some way and both wrong in some way. And he actually admits to her later that he was wrong about Harriet. She overestimates Harriet's, how do I say this without being rude? Awesomeness. But he really kind of underestimates her. In Gwyneth, oh, Lord, in Emma's mind, Harriet is kind of this, she is very much like Emma because Emma just kind of projects herself onto Harriet, I think, a bit. And so she could totally marry someone like Mr. Elton. And Mr. Knightley is like, are you kidding me? She doesn't even know who her parents are. Like, this is not going to happen. She's the silliest girl. She's dumb as a rock, blah, blah, blah. And so I feel like he is overly harsh on Harriet, which later he does apologize for. But I like that they're both kind of right, but both kind of wrong.
And then they have this scene where they're sort of coming together and apologizing to each other and deciding to let sleeping dogs lie, basically. I mean, she's sort of gotten her way.
And she uses the children, right? Emma uses her
she has that little girl
niece
in her arm.
Yeah.
And he's like,
we can both agree that this child is adorable.
Yeah, that's pretty much what they say. But one of the things they do say is, she goes, how fascinating that any discordancy between us must always arise from me being wrong. That's a paraphrase.
Oh, I loved that line because I don't know. I love my brother, but I feel like this is kind of the thing too. Like, oh, I'm always wrong, of course, right?
Of course.
It's always me. It's never you. I'm always wrong.
And he says, well, I am 16 years older than you. And she's like, well, hasn't the lapse of 21 years narrowed the gap? But she's making a point. She's like, yeah, I'm not a baby anymore. You're not a 16-year-old. We're both adults now. And she's trying to hold her own. And then he says this, which is like, damn, Knightley. He says, I have the advantage of you in not being a pretty young woman and a spoiled child. Mm-hmm. It's like, damn, okay, just
her drink in
tell
his
us
face.
how you really feel. Like,
she should have thrown her cocktail right in his face.
But that she's used to hearing that from him. That's the thing about their relationship is he's always like negging her like that, you know, and also slobbering all over.
She doesn't seem to take it personally, right? When he says things like that.
It's stasis. That's their stasis.
Let me ask you a question, though, something that I noticed. Do you think that Knightley, to people that he is close to, is actually kind of an asshole? Because there's a scene in the beginning as well when he's talking to Mrs. Weston, formerly Miss Taylor. He basically says to her face, you were a shitty governess because look at how spoiled Emma is. I mean, he says it to her. I was just rereading on an airplane when I was going to California a week ago. And it like blew my mind. They're having a conversation. They're talking about Emma. And of course, Mrs. Weston loves Emma. Mr. Knightley is always happy to point out Emma's faults. And he's basically like, if you hadn't let her walk all over you because you were such a shitty governess. And I was just like, oh, damn.
I know. And but that's the thing about, okay, and first of all, she reacts like, oh, Knightley, you know, you get the sense that like, they have this argument.
Oh, you. Yeah, but it was crazy.
But the other thing you notice is he only does it to people who are his intellectual equal and people he knows can take it. When there are people who are just dumb or you know, like lesser in social standing.
Let's say
Miss Bates, he's super nice and will help her out.
Oh my God, Kristen. Am I Mr. Knightley? Because I kind of am a total jerk to my really close friends and we always joke like, that's how you know we like you.
Well,
okay, Okay, I'm having a moment of like self-awareness here, and I don't like it.
I don't think that's the case. But let me quote Emma to you. You always demand the best treatment. Because you never put up with any other. You always deserve the best treatment because you never put up with any other. That's a quote from the end of the book that she says to him, I always deserve the best treatment. And I've always read that and thought, oh, is that how that works?
Yeah.
Like,
so that's why I can be such a mean person. It's because I just demand the best treatment. Okay.
But I feel like if you establish yourself as a nice, easygoing person, when you try to push back on people who treat you kind of badly, it comes back on you, and people are like, why are you so mad? You know, like, you're way out of control just because you're acting differently than you normally would. You're trying to stand up for yourself. Whereas somebody who's just always like laying it all out there and being blunt and saying what they really feel, those people get away with it with no repercussions. Their friends already accept that they're like that. And I think that's very true. I mean, she says it as a joke in the book, but there's a ring of truth to that as well. And she does.
This is a good example. Sorry, I think this is a good example of how Mr. Knightley, more than some of the other more recent, maybe Austen love interest that we've looked at, is kind of more, maybe because he's older, he is like a more fully formed three-dimensional character. Like I just said, I see parts of that in my character where we will give the people we are closest to a hard time. We will make fun of them, sometimes say things that cross the line. But that's a very real personality quirk to have. And while I think that maybe it's just because it's caught up in, I mean, when I make fun of people, I feel like it's kind of clear because of the language that we can use. They didn't, in Regency era, you know, you were kind of more restricted in the language that you wouldn't be like, Miss Taylor, you were the worst ever. LOL, you know, lols, you know, he wouldn't say something like that.
You have to be respectful. You have to like do your duty and be respectful.
Right, but it's still, reading it now, you're like, that was really kind of harsh. But
there are so many harsh slams in this book. There are so many times where I was like, damn, you know, like you were saying.
Say, despite the fact that Mr. Knightley, I just argued about how he kind of underestimated Harriet, I don't think you could argue that he doesn't see into the heart of people very well. I mean, it's probably really true that Miss Taylor was kind of a shitty governess, right?
Oh yeah. Well, you can tell
so it's not like he's not speaking truth.
You can tell that in the way Emma turns out, and you know the things he says, like you know, that should not matter, as you always did, just as you pleased. That's a quote from the movie. Yeah. I have to double check whether it's in the book, but you know that that's true because of how highly she thinks about herself, because you hear her narcissistic flourishes in her own, you know, the author's narration, which is actually Emma's narration, and I wanted to talk about Jane Fairfax, and for our fan, Mr. I, there's a passage that we have to talk about that he's so right about. But so setting up Knightley. So Emma does not like Jane Fairfax, and we have already covered last time why, because she's always cried up by everybody. And I think part of the subconscious reason that she doesn't like her is because Mr. Knightley is always saying how awesome Jane Fairfax is. And because they do have this latent attraction to one another, we assume she's rejecting that on that. She's resentful of that also. But anyway, I have just this passage where Mrs. Weston is talking to Emma. Now, Mrs. Weston has an idea that Mr. Knightley loves Jane Fairfax, which is not true. But she says, I have heard him speak, and so must you, so very highly of Jane Fairfax. The interest he takes in her, his anxiety about her health, his concern that she should have no happier prospects. I have heard him express himself so warmly on these points. Such an admirer of her performance on the pianoforte and of her voice. I have heard him say that he could listen to her forever. And that totally ties into the fact that the night after they hear Jane Fairfax play, and then Emma also plays, she knows in her mind that Jane Fairfax is so good at the piano and at singing. And she thinks to herself, if I had only listened to Miss Taylor and practiced more as a child, I would have been that good. And she grieves over the not
Getting a
being as
refill
cool.
in case
Yeah,
you
she
can't
grieves
see
over not looking
Thank
as
you.
cool as Jane. And she says she sits down and practices for half an hour, a full half an hour.
A full half an hour.
Or what does it say hour? I think it says half an hour. I could be wrong, but I could be wrong. But
I feel like though, I mean, that's one of the things, if I remember correctly, she's not rude about it or anything like that. She just kind of acknowledges that Jane Fairfax is way better with her. She's not overly bitter about it or anything like that. It's just kind of like, whoa, I need to practice more.
I was wrong. It's an hour and a half. So the passage is, the other circumstance of regret related also to Jane Fairfax, and there she had no doubt. She did unfeignedly and unequivocally regret the inferiority of her own playing and singing. She did most heartily grieve over the idleness of her childhood, and sat down and practiced vigorously an hour and a half.
Wow, 90 minutes. I mean, I played flute. That's a long time.
It is a long time. So
that would have been a perfect opportunity for Emma as like a mean girl to have been really mean to Jane Fairfax about it, like made some kind of snotty remark or tried to make her feel bad about being so talented, but she doesn't. She's just kind of like, whoa, I need to practice more.
She's classier than that. But remember, that was the same party where she imparted her suspicions about Jane Fairfax loving Mr. Dixon.
That's true. She does kind of talk smack about her.
So she's talking smack sort of behind her back a little bit. A little bit. But she's too classy to say something that would hurt Jane Fairfax's feelings openly. Unlike Mrs. Elton, who says things that have second meanings and backhanded compliments and all this stuff all the time. Emma's above that kind of thing, for sure.
Well, this reminds me of the Kathy Griffin stand-up routine where she's saying, I don't talk about people in front of them. That's rude. I was brought up the right way. I talk about people behind their backs. It's called manners.
And while we're talking about Knightley and Jane, gosh, I don't have it here, but my other favorite part of this entire book, I guess I have 3, so this is the second one, is when Mrs. Weston.
Wait, what was the first part?
The first one was that Emma knew that she had, but would not own it.
Yes, right.
So then the next thing is Mrs. Weston again is convinced that Knightley actually loves Jane Fairfax. So there's one scene where Knightley, Mrs. Weston, and Emma are all hanging out, and Mrs. Weston starts baiting him, and she starts trying to make him admit that he is interested in Jane. And he says this. He said, and I wish I could read it, but I don't have it marked. He says something like, Jane Fairfax is a wonderful person, but she does have a fault. She lacks an open temper, which a man wishes for in a wife. And the next line is, Emma could not but rejoice to hear that she had a fault.
We've talked a lot about the Gwyneth Paltrow movie version of the book. And one thing that I think is really interesting is the casting of Jane Fairfax. In the book, I always pictured her as just being this like kind of always sickly. She's always sick, right? She's always sick. And it turns out she's lovesick and she's tortured. And it's so tragic because she's a hidden engagement. But in the movie, they've cast this very kind of mysteriously, darkly beautiful. I should really look up on IMDb who it was because I want to say it was Polly Walker who was in Rome, but I don't know if that's true. Anyway, but she is very much kind of a very attractive, very sensual looking woman. And so it kind of, when Mrs. Weston is thinking that Mr. Knightley might be in love with her secretly, you could kind of see it. Reading the book, it's just kind of like, nope. Nope. Sorry. Yeah. Nope.
Yeah, and Frank Churchill and everybody, but especially Frank Churchill, is sort of obsessed with her skin and like the
her complexion.
The complexion, it's like brown. She's like a light tan color, and he's like, she really needs no fuller bloom, because you're supposed to have rosy cheeks. That was what was beautiful back in the day. Like
you're supposed to be like alabaster with rosy cheeks. Who does that remind you of, Kristen?
Well, I have one very attractive friend who meets all those criteria.
Oh, holy crap! It was Polly Walker.
Oh, snap! Look at you.
Yeah. So if you've seen her, she's just this like darkly sensual, beautiful, and it just didn't match to me the description of the book.
It certainly she just certainly doesn't have much chemistry with Ewan McGregor, I have to say.
Ewan McGregor in that movie is so ridiculous that nobody has chemistry with him. Maybe the horse.
Wig. Yeah, I guess we're not. I guess we're not supposed to root for him. So maybe the horse. Yeah, right. That wig. Oh my god. What I was gonna say. Yeah. Oh man. What I was gonna say is, damn it, I forgot.
That's okay. You've been drinking wine all day, sweetie. I'm sure that this is going to be our most ridiculous podcast we've ever recorded.
By far.
This also, you keep leaning really far away from the microphone, so make sure that you stay close to the mic.
Thank you. Yes.
This is going to be a great outtake.
Yeah, that'd be a good outtake. I didn't ultimately include the outtake where Bay terrified us on Halloween, and then we screamed at him for 5 minutes about.
Oh my god, you'll have to make that a special bonus 100th episode.
Yeah.
What's wrong with you?
Holy crap.
That's amazing.
Holy crap. But
what are we going to talk about? Well, whatever.
Since I can't remember. So after that night after they have no. We have to talk about
what are you talking about?
Here, I'll just go ahead and talk about it. The third part of this book, that when I read it for the first time, because it's not in the movie, when I read the book for the first time, I laughed out loud, so loud. I was like a huge ha. And Austen is not the kind of funny that you normally crack up and laugh till you cry. Even though I do, but I know a lot of people, it doesn't necessarily land like the comedy of today.
Yeah. It's more oh, I see what you did there, Miss Austen.
Yes. And it's such a funny passage. So what has happened is they have... Damn it.
Just remember, Kristen, that you love Maui. I heart Maui. I'm going to eat my cookie because I know you're going to mute this part.
This is infuriating because I know that I have it. Ah, here it is. What's happening?
Okay, so Kristen, what's your third favorite part of the book?
My third favorite part of the book. They've all been at a dance, right? And we will talk about the dance, but this is Knightley's sense of humor. We have little flashes and glimpses of his sense of humor, so that when he's hard on Emma and when he's condescending, we already like him because he said some funny things. So this scene, he is down on the street, going somewhere, and Miss Bates and Frank Churchill and Emma and Jane Fairfax and everybody are visiting Miss Bates.
That's amazing.
So Miss Bates sees Mr. Knightley and she throws at the windowsill. And she just sticks her head out.
Oh, Mr. Knightley! Mr. Knightley! Does she halloo at him?
She starts talking about the dance, and she's talking loud, and she goes on. And she goes, "Oh, Mr. Knightley, what a delightful party last night. How extremely pleasant. Did you ever see such dancing? Was it not delightful? Miss Woodhouse and Mr. Frank Churchill. I never saw anything equal to it." And of course, this is also kind of secretly pissing him off because he hates the fact
he's in love with Emma.
And so he's like, "Oh, now I have to compliment them, and I know they're listening." So he goes, "Oh, very delightful indeed. I can say nothing less. For I suppose Miss Woodhouse and Mr. Frank Churchill are hearing everything that passes." And raising his voice still more, that's not the where you'll aside, "I do not see why Miss Fairfax should not be mentioned too. I think Miss Fairfax dances very well. And Mrs. Weston is the very best country dance player, without exception, in England. Now, if your friends have any gratitude, they will say something pretty loud about you and me in return, but I cannot stay to hear it."
How great would it have been if he had been like, oh my God, Frank Churchill, that guy's such a sleaze or something.
He's too classy, but
It's
it would
true.
be pretty great.
He is, and one needs hardly even to look at Mr. Knightley to know that he is a gentleman.
Yes, as Emma says. And, what I was going to say that I forgot is that I was, as I was thinking about this podcast and thinking about the things I want to talk about, I was also thinking when I saw the movie in theaters for the first time in 1996, I did not know the story. And again, the movie we're talking about is the Gwyneth Paltrow of Jeremy Northam adaptation.
Oh, Jeremy Northam.
So, I did not know the story at all. I did not know Emma and Knightley were going to get together. And being young and dumb, I missed some of the clues that the filmmakers planted. And
Kristen, you are adorable. What were you, like 14? How old were you in 1996? 13?
I was like 13, yeah. And I also missed the clue that when Emma is singing a song and Frank Churchill, in his peacocky way, just stands up and starts singing a harmony like a weirdo, they cut to Jane Fairfax's face, and now she is looking very like emotional. And having seen the movie so many times since then, I can totally see how they were setting up her feeling, like they were showing us her face, and but it's very subtle, and I did not pick up on it then. And I also did not pick up on the clues about Knightley and Frank Churchill until they're all at this dance together. So, and even in the book, at this dance, this is the first time that we start to feel Emma's attraction to Knightley physically. There are very, very few physical descriptions of characters in Austen. And we know Emma has a hazel eye, and Harriet Smith has light eyes. But we get the eyes. We don't get really any more than that, or the skin, the complexion. So when
we know everything about everyone's countenance and complexion.
Yes, their countenance is far more important than what they. Their countenance is far more important than what they look like. I know I was leaning too far away from the mic.
So this is the dance where Knightley dances with Harriet, right?
Yes, and so what happens?
Which is very, very sweet.
It is so romantic.
When nobody wants, I mean, as someone who was always picked last for everything and nobody would have wanted to dance with, like when he goes up to her and asks her to dance, it was very, very sweet.
So Emma sees Knightley. Here it is. Knightley's there, and he is rather than dancing, he's one of those men that still exists today. In fact, they're majority of the men today who are like, oh, I hate dancing. I hate dancing. Because Knightley he's reserved. He's not like a gay, happy, jovial person. And he's like, oh, I hate dancing. So he goes to this dance. Frank and Emma are the talk of the evening. And she's rich and handsome, and he's like, the darling of the town, and they're dancing together. But he is over standing with the old men. And I think he's kind of putting himself there out of self-pity because he's feeling shunted aside. And he by this time, he knows that he loves Emma. So he has to just sort of watch her with this Frank Churchill guy. And so he's like, well, forget it. I'm an old guy. And he's going to stand over with the old men. But this is what it says. He could never, Emma's looking at him. He could never have appeared to greater advantage, perhaps anywhere, than where he had placed himself. His tall, firm, upright figure among the bulky forms and stooping shoulders of the elderly men was such as Emma felt must draw everybody's eyes. And, excepting her own partner, there was not one among the whole row of young men who could be compared with him. He moved a few steps nearer, and those few steps were enough to prove in how gentlemanlike a manner, with what natural grace, he must have danced, would he but take the trouble. Whenever she caught his eye, she forced him to smile, but in general, he was looking grave. She wished he could love a ballroom better, and could like Frank Churchill better. He seemed often observing her. So this is a physical description where we as a reader can see that she takes him seriously sexually, and so it's upping the chemistry between them.
Tell me more about his tall figure.
I know.
Read it again, Kristen. Read it again.
Then it's the next. Read it slower. Yeah. Then it's on the
This
next
is not that type of podcast.
Yeah. Well, yeah,
It could
right.
be.
We're supposed to be
How much wine have you had?
a lot. We're supposed to be rejecting any feelings of like lust for the Austen heroes. And I want to talk about that too. I do want to talk about how these two folks, Emma and Knightley, we do have to be invested in their relationship, but this is probably, obviously she couldn't have written it differently, but they do kind of seem frozen below the waist,
Well, but that's all of Austen's characters. I mean, we've touched on this with Mansfield Park a bit. And I actually think
sexy novel, though.
I think that's. I think that sometimes. Here's your obligatory podcast reference, listeners. I think that maybe after we're done going through the novels one by one, we can talk about kind of specific topics overall. And I think sexuality in Austen might be an interesting topic to touch on, because we have talked about how she was restrained by the social conventions of the time.
Yes, of course she was.
By not being able to mention certain things. I mean, she wouldn't even write a proposal scene.
Right.
Because it was too
too
personal.
emotional. It was too much.
Right.
It's over the top.
So
and I thought that
definitely not going to get too much sexuality.
No, of course not. And so I'm going out on a limb here. And I know, I'm not saying she should have written anything and I know she couldn't. But when I think about these characters and apply my rule of reality, all the characters seem so real, except for in this one aspect. And we're supposed to believe that Knightley did not know that he loved Emma in a romantic way until Frank Churchill came into the picture and he started to feel jealous. And maybe that's true, but I don't know. I feel like as a red-blooded English man that he would have, about the time she started looking really good, started having these thoughts like, I would totally take Emma behind the stables. You know what I'm saying?
Oh my God. Oh my God. Stanley, cover your eyes. Don't look.
Stanley. And the other thing is what I think. I think that Knightley is one of the Austen heroes that we can say for sure is not a virgin.
Oh, I was just going to ask you that. I was going to say Kristen, but you're not telling me that he's a virgin, right? Because he's, 34, 35?
For sure, he's not. I mean, of course,
no.
On paper, he is.
He's also a tenant. I mean, he's like not a tenant. He's the landlord, and there's all kinds of like farmers' daughters. No.
Yeah.
No. But here's the thing. You talk about how they are frozen below the waist, though. Frank Churchill does not come off that way.
Mm-hmm.
He doesn't, right?
He's a big flirt. Yeah, you're right.
He openly flirts with Emma. So he does not seem that way. I think everyone else, because of her books, she has to write the characters just kind of underplaying that aspect.
I have to say all of the Mansfield Park sexual libertines they seem very sexy to me as well. Henry Crawford for certain, and Mary.
Well, yeah, but Kristen, that's you. It's your favorite book in the world. In the whole wide world.
But
in Northanger Abbey is a good example of where it is not really underplayed. It is kind of clearly at the forefront.
Yes, and of course Marianne in Sense and Sensibility. So and I feel like there are. So
your point is well taken. It's not everyone who is.
But it
has to be
comparatively. I guess we could say comparatively.
But talk to me more about Mr. Knightley's past conquests. I'm very interested in your theories.
I don't know. I can't. But I just know. You just know. I mean, he's so mature. Oh my God! And we have to talk about this one thing. Okay, we have to talk about. I can't believe I forgot to talk about this because this is my big thesis. When Emma and Knightley are arguing about whether or not Harriet can conceivably marry Mr. Elton. And she say, she thinks she's in the right. Well, what he says to her is this. What he thinks is, oh, you're young and dumb. But he says this. He says, in unreserved moments.
Yes. Oh, I love this part. Yes. Okay.
When only men are present, he has spoken of a large family of women with 20,000 pounds apiece from Bath. All right. So this is a piece of information. Yes, in Bath.
Bald.
When Emma stumbles, when she does make this match that goes awry, and we could say, oh, she's so young and dumb. No, she does not have access to the same information that Knightley has.
Mm-hmm.
The patriarchy is holding her back from being as smart as Knightley. It's not necessarily her own mental abilities. And I think that's another way that we can feel okay as feminists, you know, with their relationship, is because she's not dumber than him and he's not coming in and mansplaining to her. That there actually is a reason for why she doesn't have the whole picture, and it's because of men and how awful they are off screen.
Yeah. Well, it's not even, I'm trying to remember, you obviously always have a better command of the actual text than I do, but he doesn't just talk about how they have 20,000, doesn't he also 20,000 pounds? Doesn't he say, you know, an unreserved emotion? Doesn't he talk about how beautiful they are and things like that too? Doesn't he mention their attractiveness as part of, I mean, so basically here's the deal, right? This is locker room talk. Mr. Elton has made it very clear to these other guys that he's friends with that there is this family of all these daughters and they're hot and they've got 20,000 pounds. And my question is the Mrs. Elton, is she one of those daughters? I always thought that was the implication.
Here I have the text.
Are you listening to me, Kristen? You're not listening to me.
No.
Kristen is not listening to me, ladies and gentlemen.
Man.
I know, you're looking it up in the book. And I asked you a question. It was rude.
I'm sorry.
It's okay. I'm going to look it up on the phone.
Here it is.
Okay.
Here it is. I am convinced he does not mean to throw himself away. I have heard him speak with great animation of a large family of young ladies that his sisters are intimate with, who all have 20,000 pounds apiece. So,
is that all it says?
Yeah.
I thought there was a part where he talks about how attractive they all are.
It's a part where he talks about how attractive Elton is. So because depending on it, Elton will not do. Elton is a very good sort of man and a very respectable vicar of Highbury, but not at all likely to make an imprudent match. He knows the value of a good income as well as anybody. Elton may talk sentimentally, but he will act rationally. He is as well acquainted with his own claims as you can be with Harriet's. He knows that he is a very handsome young man and a great favorite wherever he goes. And from his general way of talking in unreserved moments when there are only men present, I am convinced he does not mean to throw himself away, which is a reference to, of course, money.
Right.
So, yeah.
So I find that interesting because in my mind, Mr. Elton is not a very handsome man.
Well,
but that is because, well, no, not just Alan Cumming in the Gwyneth Paltrow 1996 movie, but also because Mr. Elton is such a jerk.
Yes.
That my mental picture of him is influenced by the way that he acts and the things that he says. And so that makes him ugly in my mind.
And of course, we're only told that he's handsome without getting a whole lot of description of how handsome he is. So we don't have that information always at the forefront either. And I never thought he was handsome. Although I did kind of think after I saw Clueless, I started seeing that Elton.
What is that actor? It's another Jeremy, isn't it? What is his name? Okay, I'm gonna have to look this up. IMDb is getting quite the workout in this podcast. So here's my question, Kristen. Is Mrs. Elton one of those daughters?
I think so.
Is she one of the daughters of the large family?
Yes, I think so. Yes, because she does come from Bath.
I think that you're correct.
I think that we're supposed
That was what I always thought in my mind.
So he's like, okay, I can't have Emma.
He gets embarrassed when Emma slaps his ass out of the carriage. He gets embarrassed and he flees to this family that he knows has good prospects for him.
Yes, and although they are rich, it's
Jeremy Sisto. What?
There you go. Although they are rich, she does not have classy connections. Right. She has an uncle who is in the law line. That's all they say. He's obviously.
What are you trying to say about lawyers, Kristen?
He's obviously some unimportant clerk, and then I think her money was made by trade, and so she's wealthy, but she's not classy. She doesn't come from a good background, and so that's why Emma's like, first of all, but she also has bad manners. She's pert and underbred, and she's always talking about the rich people she knows, trying to make it look like she's one of them. She's a classy person too, and she's just really nouveau riche and like too brassy about it. And she's always talking about. Go ahead.
Sorry. Oh, I think that there's a lot of, she has the sense that she can, because she is now married to the vicar, she can come into the social circle and kind of take over. And I think there's a lot of resentment on Emma's and other, well, I don't know if anyone else feels the same way, but Emma is definitely very resentful of that behavior.
And she hates the fact that Mrs. Elton is a bride and she's getting all this attention because she's the new bride. And I think it even says when Mrs. Elton opens the ball, and it was Emma's a ball held, she felt particularly for her, for Emma, it was enough to make her think of marrying.
Emma needs to seriously she needs to pull a Carrie Bradshaw, marry herself, register at Manola Blahnik for shoes, and just call it a day.
Did that happen? Did that happen?
Yes, there is an episode, side note, gentle listeners, there is an episode of Sex and the City where Carrie goes to a birthday party for a toddler, and the parents insist that everyone take off their shoes to not track dirt into their home, and someone steals Carrie's Manolos, and so she asks the mother / her friend to compensate her for the shoes that were stolen at her home, and the woman says, well, Carrie, these are $350 shoes. I just don't see why I should have to bankroll your lifestyle.
Ooh.
And Carrie then sits down and figures out, from engagement gifts, wedding presents, baby showers, birthdays of the children, how much money she has spent on this woman's life.
Yeah.
And basically decides, fine, I'm going to marry myself. And leaves her a voicemail where she's like, I've decided to marry myself. I'm registered at Manolo Blahnik. This is the one item I'm registered for. It's the shoes. So the woman has to end up buying her the shoes. It's very funny. But this is essentially what we're talking about, right? You know, there's all these perks that come
with being married
and being a bride. And Emma, who is determined, at least in the first half of the book, not to ever get married, she will not have those advantages.
Yes.
This is also shown in Pride and Prejudice. Remember when Lydia comes back with Mr. Wickham, and she says to Jane, you must go after me, for I am now a married woman. It changes the pecking order of the sisters.
I can't remember if that is in the text.
It's in the movie, and that's all that matters.
And it's totally real. I mean, I'm sure Lydia would have totally done that. I have to look it up. I'm mad at myself. You guys have just lost my memory, but I have read these books many times.
All the buckets of wine you've drunk today.
I feel like people aren't going to respect me because they're like, she can't quote it from memory. I'm like,
Kristen, I can barely remember the basic plot of the book, so don't feel bad.
But now I think it's time to move in to the Box Hill scene and what happens at Box Hill and this really important event in Emma, and sort of like a where everything blows up. Mm-hmm. So are you ready? Are we ready to talk about Box Hill?
Well, I don't have any more champagne in the bottles 10 feet away, so I can't get to it, but I think we're ready.
So, as we know, they're all at Box Hill. Pretty much everybody is at Box Hill, and they're having a picnic. I mean, it's a sightseeing. It's kind of a day. But Mrs. Elton is sort of just sort of putting Emma down in these little ways, and everybody's sort of in a bad mood. And the reason everybody's sort of in a bad mood is because many of them are unacknowledged lovers. Right. So Frank Churchill and Jane Fairfax have had a falling out, and they are very unhappy with each other.
And is this the falling out of a result of Frank Churchill shamelessly flirting with Emma.
That's part of it. And also
The Mr. Dixon thing.
Well, that's part of it, but also what happens is he's riding on a horse and he meets Jane Fairfax halfway down the lane and he wants to walk her back to Highbury, and she's like, no, if people see us walking together, it'll be, and he gets really mad. And that's one of the things. I mean, she doesn't like the Mr. Dixon thing, but she put up with it for a really long time, which is really surprising, given what a moral person she's supposed to be. Yeah. So what happens, because they have this love respect. Oh, and the other unacknowledged lover, of course, is Knightley, who loves Emma. So Frank Churchill, being pissed off at Jane Fairfax, decides he's going to flirt with Emma. And he flirts,
even more than usual.
Yes, even more. They flirt excessively. And Emma even knows. She's like, no English word but flirtation could very well describe their interactions. Mr. Frank Churchill and Miss Woodhouse flirted together excessively. They were laying themselves open to that very phrase, and to having it sent off in letters to their extended relations, blah, blah, blah. And this is so interesting to me. This is another fascinating insight into people. It says, not that Emma was gay and thoughtless from any real felicity. It was rather because she felt less happy than she had expected. She laughed because she was disappointed, and though she liked Frank Churchill for his attentions and thought them all, whether in friendship, admiration, or playfulness, extremely judicious, they were not winning back her heart. She still intended him for her friend. So outwardly, they look like they're lovers. Inwardly, Emma's just pushing herself to fulfill a picture of what should be. And I think that's really interesting. So then
I think that's very relatable for people too, especially young women.
And then this happens. Oh, and this is so...
Is this the Miss Bates slam?
Not quite yet.
Okay, that's epic.
This is Mr. Knightley, though. Okay, so here's Frank Churchill, and he's being loud, and he's saying loud things. And he says, I say nothing of which I am ashamed, replied he with lively impudence. I saw you first in February. Let everybody on the hill hear me if they can. Let my accent swell to Mickleham on one side and Dorking on the other. I saw you first in February. And then, whispering, our companions are excessively stupid. What shall we do to rouse them? Any nonsense will serve. They shall talk. Ladies and gentlemen, I am ordered by Miss Woodhouse, who, wherever she is, presides, to say that she desires to know what you are all thinking of. Some laughed and answered good-humoredly. Miss Bates said a great deal. Mrs. Elton swelled at the idea of Miss Woodhouse's presiding. Mr. Knightley's answer was the most distinct. Is Miss Woodhouse sure that she would like to hear what we are all thinking of? That is such a specific slam. She knows that she is behaving badly. Right. And that is such an open reproach. Like, is Miss Woodhouse sure she wants to know what I'm thinking? Like, well,
she can also always be pretty sure that Mr. Knightley is in some way being critical of her, right?
Yeah, that's true. That's true. And she does laugh it off. She just laughs it off. But I'm here thinking, like, damn, Knightley. And then
there's a lot of damn Knightley in this book.
Yes. And then, before we talk about the insults, I want to talk about Frank and Jane. And they're hanging out, and they're within each other's earshot. And Frank starts to talk about people who get engaged after a short amount of acquaintance, which is exactly what happened with him and Jane in a public place. They met in Weymouth, which is sort of like Bath, right? How well they suit one another, he's saying about Mr. and Mrs. Elton. Very lucky marrying as they did upon an acquaintance formed only in a public place. They only knew each other, I think, a few weeks in Bath. Peculiarly lucky. For as to any real knowledge of a person's disposition that Bath or any public place can give, it is all nothing. There can be no knowledge. It is only by seeing women in their own homes, among their own set, just as they always are, that you can form any just judgment. Short of that, it is all guess and luck, and will generally be ill luck. How many a man has committed himself on short acquaintance and rooted all the rest of his life? Shit, right? Miss Fairfax, who had seldom spoken before, except among her own confederates, spoke now. Such things do occur, undoubtedly. She was stopped by a cough. Frank Churchill turned to her to listen. You were speaking, said he gravely. She recovered her voice. I was only going to observe that though such unfortunate circumstances do sometimes occur to both men and women, I cannot imagine them to be very frequent. A hasty and imprudent attachment may arise, but there is generally time to recover from it afterwards. I would be understood to mean that it can only be weak, irresolute characters whose happiness must always be at the mercy of chance, who will suffer an unfortunate acquaintance to be an inconvenience and oppression forever. Damn!
Yeah.
Like, damn. That is like throwing down. That is like a really serious fight. It's like a really serious thing to say. Like, yeah, we're engaged. And I'm talking about how awful it is to be engaged to you in code.
Yeah, she's like, I'm talking about you. P.S.
Yeah.
This is why, Emma, you are well served to read Emma more than once. Because there are all these, this is going to be great for Arnie. There's all these things going on behind the scenes.
Absolutely.
That as in your first read, you may not catch the all of the details and all of the foreshadowing.
Yeah, and even halfway through the book, when you do get that chapter from Knightley's perspective, where Jane Fairfax and Frank Churchill, Knightley observes them passing a secret message back and forth. And you know, as a reader, you read that and you're like, oh, a clue. Knightley,
Jinkies.
You know, Frank and Jane have something going on. I read that and then I go on reading the book and it's almost like I forget that I was told that.
I remember I first read this book in high school and I was just completely taken by surprise. And then in retrospect, when you go back and read it, you're like, well, duh. But at the time, I was like, where did that come from? That's completely left field. And poor Jane Austen is like rolling in her grave. Like, really, Margaret? Really? I left you all of these clues and it's from the left field?
Yep.
Maybe you should stop looking at the saxophone players during marching band and focus on reading my book. Wow, was that too real?
Wait. Wait. What? In my band, all the hot guys were in the trumpet section.
Oh, it's
but
interesting.
They were all assholes. This is true. All trumpet players are assholes. This
is not true. This is not true. One of my dearest friends, Andrew, is a trumpet player, and he is not.
But
he's
not
also
in
a
high
ginger.
School. Probably not
he's a
in high
ginger.
School, though. Yeah,
I don't know. We'll have to ask him.
Only ginger trumpet players are okay in my book. The rest of them are a bunch of assholes. It's true. You know it's true.
Okay.
You know it's true.
Have some wine, Kristen.
Yeah, and so then the big insult, and in the book, it's hard. I feel like it comes across better in all of the movies because
it does. You see the reaction. I think
there's that awkward moment of silence that just hangs, which you can't really represent.
Why don't you read
in text? Well,
why don't you read the passage?
So let me get this flag out of the way. So here's Frank Churchill trying to make everybody talk again. And he goes, here are 7 of you besides myself, who, she is pleased to say, am very entertaining already. And she only demands from each of you either one thing very clever, be it prose or verse, original or repeated, or 2 things moderately clever, or 3 things very dull indeed. And she engages to laugh heartily at them all. Oh, very well, exclaimed Miss Bates. Then I need not be uneasy. 3 things very dull indeed, that will just do for me, you know. I shall be sure to say 3 dull things as soon as ever I open my mouth, shan't I? Looking round with the most good-humoured dependence on everybody's assent. Do not you all think I shall? She's sort of laughing at herself. Emma could not resist. Ah, ma'am, but there may be a difficulty. Pardon me, but you will be limited as to number. Only 3 at once. Miss Bates, deceived by the mock ceremony of her manner, did not immediately catch her meaning, but when it burst on her, it could not anger, though a slight blush showed that it could pain her. Ah, well, to be sure, yes, I see what she means, turning to Mr. Knightley, and I will try to hold my tongue. I must make myself very disagreeable, or she would not have said such a thing to an old friend. Which is sad.
Oh, I'm so sad now.
I
You
know,
read
and
that with such, it was so beautifully read. Now I'm really sad
oh,
because it is very sad.
it is, and you know, it does not really say that Emma feels bad in the book, but in the movies, it's they usually adapt it. Certainly in the Gwyneth one, they usually adapt it so where she immediately knows she's gone too far. And
Well,
I think
everybody just kind of, and then it's awkward. Nobody wants to look at anybody else, and Miss Bates is getting very upset and almost starts to cry, and it's just,
it's really
it's very hard to watch and or read.
sort of like us. I mean, that's Austen. Somebody taking someone else to dance is the highlight. It's like a huge crescendo of awesomeness.
Yeah.
Someone making an offhand comment that slightly, you know, this is somebody is the deepest low, because what we're talking
But that
about
happens.
it really happens. What we're talking about
Yeah.
is the tiny trade-offs, the tiny back and forths of everyday life that make up our lived experience and can really hurt us on a regular basis. I mean, I get upset all the time. It's not like I ever have like a gigantic catastrophe in my life, but somebody said something that hurt my feelings. It was like a one-off comment, and I'm like, oh, you know, like those are the things that get us in our days. Those are the things that make up our life. And when, you know, I think we've all been there. I think we've all said something that thoughtless. That
Yeah, I was going to say that I'm usually on the Emma side, where I say something, you know, trying to be funny, haha, entertain everyone because I'm the class clown, and it ends up being extremely hurtful. And I will then proceed to be, for years, I can remember something that I said in 5th grade that was rude, that I still regret. And we're talking like, what was that? Like 25 years ago, if not more. Something so long ago, and I still regret saying it and hurting someone like that. And but this is why Austen is brilliant, because these are the lives that we lead even now.
And we all understand what that can do to someone's self-esteem. You know, we feel for Miss Bates a lot because it is a personal tragedy in a way. And because her standing in their social circle is so tenuous anyway, which is one of the reasons that Knightley uses to get mad at Emma. Now, Knightley
let me just say before we get into that, that is actually one of the things. So we talk about him mansplaining to her all the time, but I feel like when he takes her to task for this, as a modern reader, you don't really understand why it is such a big deal until Knightley explains.
Yes.
The difference in their social classes, the difference in their age, in their socioeconomic backgrounds. It all adds up to why this was such a misstep and so rude. Absolutely.
And in the Gwyneth Jeremy Northam adaptation, as a young viewer who did not know what was going to happen, feeling that pain of the insult, and then in the next scene, he's sort of catching up to her. He's like coming from behind her, and he's like, "How could you be?" He's calling to her, "How could you be so unfeeling to Miss Bates?" And then he's saying all of those things, you know, like she cannot stop mentioning it. You really hurt her feelings. And Emma's like, oh, come on. She's trying to defend herself, but she knows. But, you know, with Knightley, she always has to try to defend herself. So Emma's like, you have to acknowledge that along the good, there's an equal amount of the ridiculous blended into her. And he goes, were she prosperous or a woman equal to you in fortune, I should not argue about it. And then in the adaptation, he grabs her arm and yanks her around and goes, she is poor, even more so than when she was born. And if she should live to be an old lady, she will sink further still. Her situation being in every way beneath you should secure your compassion. And he like goes off, and he's mad. And it's really the anger of the spurned lover, but it's also the anger of a guardian who had higher expectations and higher hopes. So it's all of that anger balled up together into this frustration. He's a frustrated spurn, you know, like not really spurned, but you know, you know, he's not an acknowledged lover. And that was the scene. That was the scene for me. After I watched that, I was like, I cannot wait.
I get it.
to see this movie again. I cannot wait to see this movie again and watch that scene again, because that just came out of nowhere and it was like, pow, you know, like right in your face. He was really pissed off. And
I don't know if it's in the movie, but I know it's in the book where he is taking her to task, and he says, and it's not just the difference that she's poor, but what I remember very vividly is, and of course I can't quote it because I'm not Kristen,
I got it.
but basically when Emma was a little girl, she would be honored if Miss Bates would pay her attention. But now that Emma is grown, it's the opposite. And because she is now the daughter of a very wealthy man, it's the opposite. And Miss Bates is flattered when Emma pays attention to her. And for some reason, that change, and that for a reason why it was even more hurtful, has really stayed with me. So you have it. Can you read it?
I do. I completely agree. And right before he says it, he says his other catchphrase, "It was badly done," which
badly done,
adaptation is like badly done. In the Kate Beckinsale, Mark Strong adaptation, he says it twice, which is really badly done, Emma. He's like always walking around, badly done. Anyway, your situation should secure your compassion. It was badly done indeed. You, whom she had known from an infant, whom she had seen grow up from a period when her notice was an honor, to have you now in thoughtless spirits and the pride of the moment laugh at her, humble her, and before her niece too, and before others, many of whom would be entirely guided by your treatment of her. Yeah, because when you're a little kid, you know, and somebody takes notice of you, which I'm sure Miss Bates always did, being a really sweet woman, and this is what you throw back in her face, you young upstart, you young kid, not respecting your elders, which was a huge value at the time, right? Your duty towards other people, who, especially those who are older than you and your elders.
It just makes Miss Bates is such, Miss Bates's character is, yes, she's comic relief and hilarious. And I talked about how I would just kind of skip her long monologues. She is such an amazing character and so pitiable, which I hate to use because we've talked about how she is so cheerful. She's in kind of this really awful circumstance. She is poor. She will only get poorer. She has very little future prospects, but she is so goddamn cheerful all the time. And she is such a wonderful person, right? She's so friendly and she's so nice. And she's always respectful and always so excited to talk to people. And it's like kicking a puppy. It's like, Emma, you kicked a puppy. And when he lays it out like that and just kind of fully explains her situation, that as a reader, you really get it. Yeah. And it's so then you have, at least me, I have all this cognitive dissonance because on one hand, I understand where Emma's coming from. She is ridiculous. There is an equal amount of ridiculousness. On the other hand, she is in this situation, Miss Bates, that makes you should not ever talk to her like that. And it's just, it's so real. It's so Austen.
Yes, it is so real and so Austen. So like the "That's So Raven" theme song. That's so Austen. So that's Box Hill. That is incredible climax of the book. And then some other
of the book, happens. But you know.
So should we bring it home? I mean, should we talk about? Should we bring it? We've got to bring it home. We'll talk about that. You know, they finally work it out.
Well, there is one last. There is one last big, very sitcom-y. Emma thinks, what's the word I'm looking for? I've had way too much champagne. Where Mr. Knightley is going to propose to Emma, but she keeps stopping him because it's this big misunderstanding where she thinks he's going to say something else, but he just wants to say that he loves her.
Yeah, Harriet Smith has got it into her pretty little head that Mr. Knightley loves her, when in fact Mr. Knightley's just really trying to get her back with Robert Martin.
Right. And frankly, let me just say, the fact that Mr. Knightley is like, Harriet's not so bad. Like, that's huge praise for her, considering where he started. Yeah. He was not on the Harriet Smith train in any way in the beginning of the book. So the idea that he would be in love with her is just like, Harriet, I don't even know what to do with you anymore.
Well, But he did say, Emma did hear Mr. Knightley say, "Oh, she's actually not so bad," and she does know his high praise. And so when Harriet comes to her and says, I believe I have proof that Knightley loves me," that's when it all bursts upon her. And it says it darted through her with the speed of an arrow. Right. And that's finally her jealousy kicks in and her realization kicks in that she has to have Knightley. But now she fully believes, she's willing to believe that Knightley wants Harriet. And so when Harriet leaves, Emma, I love this part. She says, "Oh God, that I had never seen her."
Yeah. Well, let me ask you a question, not to take us on too far of a tangent when we're so near the end. Do you think that if Harriet hadn't thought she was in love with Mr. Knightley, do you think that Emma would have thought she loved him? It's very much like, now that it seems like there's a danger of me not having him.
Yes. I
now I'm in love with him. Oh my God, I'm such a fool. I've been in love with him this whole time, now that he might not be around for my every whim.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. And what if she hadn't had that realization because of Harriet, and he did come to her and he did propose to her the way that he does? Who knows? Would that shock her into a realization? Maybe.
But she would have said no.
That belief, yeah, probably. But that knowledge.
Here's the thing. I think, okay, and we're in hypothetical land. If she did not have this realization on her part that she was in love with Mr. Knightley, and he had come to her and been like, "I want to call you, I love you, I want us to be married," I think Emma first impulse would have been to say no, but bringing it back full circle, if it meant that he would then be also removed from her life like Miss Taylor was upon marriage, I think that she would marry him just to have him near her. Does that make sense?
Yeah, she could have been jump-started. And, the belief, when he left after having been rejected, she would realize that she would no longer be first with him. There's a whole passage about how she always took for granted that she was always first with him, and how much that meant to her. And that sort of, it's not adoration, but it is a prioritization of her that, of course, she as a narcissist took as something for granted, and then she realizes how much it actually does mean to her.
Well, it's like we said in Northanger Abbey, and Austen, as the narrator, says very clearly that sometimes the first thing that can attract you about someone is knowing that they are attracted to you.
That's right. And probably once Jump started thinking about it, she would have acknowledged her own attraction. I think so.
And what is she going to do? Like, hang out with her dad for the rest of her life? I mean.
Right. And, but because of his fatherliness, he comes to her when he hears that.
I have to tell you that Bay is being ridiculous and trying to make me laugh in the background.
Oh, Bay. Quit messing up the podcast, Bay.
I know, right? My dream is that one day Bay, as the faceless producer type, gets his own website dedicated to him by fangirls who listen to First Impressions. The mysterious Bay.
Well, I gotta tell you, I feel bad. I have to apologize to Bay because I posted our first Google Hangouts on Air YouTube link, but it was to the unedited version of the video. I had made an edited version. I was like, it looks great. Then when I posted it, went back to all the troubleshooting at the beginning and all the issues that I cut out with my editing process, and he was in it. And I did not mean to do that.
I don't think that the nobody saw it.
I know, but I felt so dumb, and I was like,
don't feel bad. It just adds to his allure.
If anybody
adds mystery.
If anybody did try to watch it though, and they started at the beginning, they're like, "What the hell is this? What the hell? Why do I have to watch them troubleshoot?" I felt so bad, and one of the reasons I
could tell you felt bad by the 5 Facebook posts you posted after it apologizing.
Well, I had to delete all the original posts and post new posts, and I had to post a new post on the Facebook page, and then I had to share the new post on my Facebook page. I probably shouldn't have shared it, but I was just like, if anybody was interested in seeing it, maybe they'll be interested.
It's okay.
But that's why I had to make the Facebook page. I made it unilaterally, by the way, listeners. I didn't even ask Maggie. It was just like, by the way, we have a Facebook page.
And I was like, this is amazing.
Because
clearly I did not object.
I think episode 7 is the last episode I will post to my first personal Facebook feed, because I feel like everybody who is interested will now either subscribe to the podcast or follow the Facebook page. And I don't have to have the people who are not interested in the podcast scroll past it, because I feel like they're getting irritated with me.
I'm still going to share it on my personal page.
Well, good, because your friends, listen, this is the I deserve good treatment because it's all I will accept phenomenon, because you only have friends who accept that you are going to post stuff, and you have the TV blog and you have all that stuff, and everybody's just like, yeah, it's Maggie, she's always doing that. When I start like promoting my stuff on my Facebook page, I feel like I get people are like, God, will she shut the fuck up?
Kristen, it's all about strategy, okay? Listeners, I'm going to tell you right now, I'm not even on Twitter, right? Because that's like a step too far. I don't think people don't want to hear about what I twat out at them, right? So this is the key to Facebook success, though. You have to have like 80% just hilarious nonsense that people enjoy reading, and then you can have 20% like actual things you care about. So 80% of my Facebook posts are just like hilarious things that occur to me in my crazy brain, or check out this really funny quote, or this really funny meme, or look at this picture from Best of Tumblr. It's amazing. So people are like, oh, Margaret's Facebook page is so funny, I'm going to always read it. And then you hit them with your podcast. Yep.
I think there's a lot of logic in that.
Truth. Yep. Truth. You just got to like rope them in with the funny stuff, and then you can hit them with your truth.
I also feel like you don't accept people who make you feel like your interests are lame. I don't know. You don't accept it.
I guess that's true. I would not become I have definitely some family member Facebook friends who I'm kind of like, why am I friends with this person? And I have maybe a handful of people that I friended that now I legitimately don't remember how I know them or where I met them. But that is very small. I try to keep my Facebook friends to, if I can't remember how I know you or think of 3 substantial facts from your actual life, then why would I be Facebook friends with you? But Kristen, I think that what your issue is, if I may offer you some Facebook advice, you post so rarely. So that it makes it seem like the percentage of the podcast related posts is high.
Yeah, possibly.
But now that Kevin has been out of town, you have been posting more. So I think you're doing a great job. Keep up the good work.
Thank you.
I can tell like if you're getting lonely, because I'm like, Kristen updated Facebook twice today. She must be really lonely. And then I feel bad.
I have to say, I got like a bazillion likes on that post about how I set a half-eaten banana down somewhere in my house, and I couldn't find it anywhere. I was like, it's somewhere.
Which, of course, made me think of the time you thought you had left your wallet at my house.
My phone, right?
And drove all the way back here, searched everywhere, searched the parking lot. It turns out you'd left it on your kitchen counter.
On my kitchen counter. I'm like, I had to go into the kitchen, set it down. I don't even remember going into the kitchen. It's like I lost 5 minutes of my life. I was like, oh my God. And I was like, I just walked in the door. My phone is not here. I have to drive back to Maggie's. And I had walked into the kitchen. I have no memory of it. Anyway.
Oh, that's right. It was your phone. I said it was your wallet. It was your phone.
But it's okay.
And whose phone were you texting me on? I remember thinking this. I was like, how was she even? How was she even texting me?
No, this is a true story. I took my work phone and programmed all my personal contacts into it because I knew that I would lose my personal phone and have nobody's number. And so I made it. I hope none of my coworkers are listening to that. I hope that's not like a violation of company policy or something. I don't think
I'm sure it's fine. I only have one phone, which is my cell phone. So if I ever lose that, I think I have left it somewhere before, and I've had to email my mom, who checks her email once a day, and been like, I really hope you see this.
I always make Kevin post to my Facebook page and say, Kristen lost her phone. This was before the work phone days.
Yeah. Anyway, that was like a 20-minute tangent, but you guys know that's the best part of the podcast. Come on.
That's right. They like us now. They've decided they like us.
Well, now everyone will be a successful social media poster because I've given them the secret.
That's right. And that's a real thing, that theory of content. But let's talk about the proposal.
Let's talk about Emma.
Let's talk about Knightley, the proposal, and the post-proposal when they talk about why they love each other, and then we'll be done.
Okay. Not that we want to leave our listeners.
No. But this is kind
I just really want to go eat more Girl Scout cookies, to be honest.
Yeah, I understand that, so I'll be brief.
And I can't do it while the microphone is on, so.
This is kind of it makes me feel the feels. I wouldn't say it's over the top romantic, but it does make me feel something, because Knightley fully believes Emma loves Frank Churchill. He goes out of town. He is
putting himself out there, as they say.
He's like, I can't do it anymore.
This is a big risk.
I can't see them. I can't see. Yeah. Well, he leaves town. Then he hears that Frank Churchill has been secretly engaged to Jane Fairfax all this time. And his first thought is of Emma and how heartbroken she must be. And he goes to her. He can't help himself. And I think that's really romantic, because he cares so much about her feelings.
It is romantic.
And then she thinks he's coming to tell her that he's going to marry Harriet Smith.
Right.
She doesn't want to hear it.
This is the wacky sitcom misunderstanding.
Yes, this is sitcom, and it's sort of, it doesn't read as over-the-top comedy, but it is a sitcom-y type thing.
I don't say that to disparage the plot. I just say it I just mean to say that it's a very kind of typical modern story. Well, not even modern. It's a very normal storytelling device where the characters think that something else is happening. And so you get a lot of doublespeak and misunderstanding of what people are saying, which is, Emma is a comedic novel, I think, at its heart, right? Wouldn't you say?
Oh, yes.
If you were going to describe it, you would say it was a comedy.
Oh, yes.
And this is a very comedic, very, very typical comedic device.
Yes, I would completely agree with that. So Knightley said, and I'll just read the passage. So Knightley is talking about Frank Churchill, and he's like, everything turns out for the good, for his good. He meets with a young woman at a watering place, gains her affection, cannot even weary her by negligent treatment, and had he and all his family sought round the world for a perfect wife for him, they could not have found her superior. His aunt is in the way. His aunt dies. He has only to speak.
I love that too, because it's basically like Jane Austen calling out her own Deus Ex Machina, right?
Yes.
Guess what? The aunt dies, and Frank Churchill's rich. He can do whatever he wants, and it's just funny. Like one of her characters calls out the author on that.
If she plants a flag on it, for sure. He has only to speak. His friends are all eager to promote his happiness. He has used everybody ill, and they are all delighted to forgive him. He is a fortunate man indeed. You speak as if you envied him. And I do envy him, Emma. In one respect, he is the object of my envy. Emma could say no more. They seemed to be within half a sentence of Harriet, and her immediate feeling was to avert the subject if possible. She made her plan. She would speak of something totally different, the children in Brunswick Square, and she only waited for breath to begin when Mr. Knightley startled her by saying, "You will not ask me what is the point of my envy. You are determined, I see, to have no curiosity. You are wise, but I cannot be wise. Emma, I must tell you what you will not ask, though I may wish it unsaid the next moment." "Oh, then don't speak it, she eagerly cried. "Take a little time, consider, do not commit yourself." "Thank you," said he, in an accent of deep mortification, and not another syllable followed. Emma could not bear to give him pain. He was wishing to confide in her, perhaps to consult her. Cost her what it would, she would listen. She might assist his resolution or reconcile him to it. She might give just praise to Harriet, or, by representing to him his own independence, relieve him from that state of indecision which must be more intolerable than any alternatives to such a mind as his. They had reached the house. "You are going in, I suppose," said he. "No," replied Emma, quite confirmed by the depressed manner in which he still spoke. "I should like to take another turn. Mr. Perry is not gone." And after proceeding a few steps, she added, "I stopped you ungraciously just now, Mr. Knightley, and I am afraid gave you pain. But if you have any wish to speak openly to me as a friend, or to ask my opinion of anything that you may have in contemplation, as a friend, indeed, you may command me. I will hear whatever you like. I will tell you exactly what I think." "As a friend," repeated Mr. Knightley. "Emma, that, I fear, is a word. No, I have no wish. Stay, yes, why should I hesitate? I have gone too far already for concealment. Emma, I accept your offer. Extraordinary as it may seem, I accept it, and refer myself to you as a friend. Tell me then, have I no chance of ever succeeding?" He stopped in his earnestness to look the question, and the expression of his eyes overpowered her. "My dearest Emma," said he, "for dearest you will always be, whatever the event of this hour's conversation. My dearest, most beloved Emma, tell me at once. Say no if it is to be said." She could really say nothing. "You are silent," cried he with great animation. "Absolutely silent. At present I will ask no more." And then he says stuff like, "I cannot make speeches, Emma. If I loved you less, I might be able to talk about it more, but you know what I am. You hear nothing but the truth from me. I have blamed you and lectured you, and you have borne it as no other woman in England would have borne it. Bear with the truths I would tell you now, dearest Emma, as well you have borne with them. The manner, perhaps, may have as little to recommend them. God knows I have been a very indifferent lover. But you understand me. Yes, you see, you understand my feelings, and will return them if you can. At present, I just ask once, only once, to hear your voice." Which is pretty romantic writing, I have to say. It really gets me every time because it's not overblown. It's the language of like real feeling where he's like, I'm not good at this. Like, I don't know what to say. And I just really, I feel like it's really affecting, and it's very him, and it's very fits the character so well, and is a beautiful.
It is romantic. I remember the first time I read it, and I was just kind of thinking the part where he calls her beloved, and I remember going back and thinking, did he just propose? He never actually says, "Will you marry me? Let's get hitched. I want," like in the movie, he says, "I wish to call you wife." In the book, he doesn't say anything like that. It's the fact that he uses the word beloved is kind of the big clue. And I remember just reading it and being like, oh my gosh, he's proposing. Like, this is it. This is it. There's no down on one knee. There's no grand gesture. It's, by modern standards, it's not still exactly clear
what he's asking
for a while
for,
what he's getting at.
What he's asking for is her permission to try to make her love him. Mm-hmm. It's like a permission to, it's like,
which is every woman knows is totally sexy, right?
It's like the first, it's like very weird. There's really no modern analog, because it's like you need permission to try to make someone fall in love with you.
But it's very sweet because we have never seen him be so doubting of himself.
Or open with his own feelings.
Right. We've never seen him as a character be not sure of something that he has said. So the fact that he is almost asking permission to get her to love him, it's very, it's very sweet. It is very romantic, I think.
I think it's romantic too, and there are so many beautiful passages relating to it. But the final thing we'll just talk about is that once they get together, we can talk again about how we feel about him being a father figure and growing into a lover. And there was that reference you made to him loving her when she was like 13 or whatever. But this is so adorable because he's talking to her. He's talking to her about why he fell in love with her. And he's like, I was so invested in you. In the beginning of the book, it talks about him like saving things that she like made because he thought they were like proof of her intelligence and her good judgment. And
which, by the way, Harriet does too.
Yeah. Oh yeah, that's such a good point. That's such a good point. Damn it, Maggie.
She has her little box of things from Mr. Elton,
most
right?
Precious treasures.
Right.
He says, "How often when you were a girl have you said to me with one of your saucy looks, Mr. Knightley, Mr. Knightley, I am going to do so-and-so. Papa says I may. Or I have Miss Taylor's leave, something which you knew I did not approve. In such cases, my interference was giving you 2 bad feelings instead of 1. And I just think that's adorable. And so, and he says something like, by dint of imagining so many flaws in you and trying to correct you so much, I must have been in love with you since you were 13 at least, which to me is like, okay.
Well, and this is the thing. Gross. This is the thing. As a modern reader, that's very squicky, right? But at the time, well, first of all, it was not unusual for women to marry very young. Maybe not 13 by that time, but still, it was not unusual. And second, when you have such a restricted social circle, the idea that you would marry someone that you've known your entire life was probably not that.
Not that, usual. Yeah. Right, you marry your cousin too.
Within the book, how many people do we see Emma hang out with? It's like
3
12.
People. Yeah. And then this is such an adorable passage too. He said he doesn't want her to call him Mr. Knightley anymore because,
right.
like we were saying, he used to be Mr. Knightley, the authority figure. Mr. Knightley, you always called me. Mr. Knightley, and from habit, it has not so very formal a sound, and yet it is formal. I want you to call me something else, but I do not know what.
George.
I remember calling you George in one of my amiable fits about 10 years ago. I did it because I thought it would offend you.
Yeah.
But as you made no objection, I never did it again. Cannot you call me George now? That's one of my favorite lines in the whole book. And cannot you call me George now? It's written so.
So do you think that Emma continues to call him Mr. Knightley? I guess it's not unusual for married couples then to refer to themselves as Mr. and Mrs.
Impossible.
But even in private, it's a little weird.
I never can call you anything but Mr. Knightley. I will not promise even to equal the elegant terseness of Mrs. Elton by calling you Mr. K. And then she says, I'll call you once by your Christian name when we get married. It's cute.
Mm-hmm.
All right.
So do you think she calls him that in private? Mr. Knightley, it's time for bed.
Yes, I do. I do think so.
That's a little weird then.
But I also gravitate to men who, obviously I did not marry one, but I also gravitate to men who are constantly telling me to be better and trying to be better. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I've definitely had a number of, like when I was younger, just like bad relationships like that, where you're chasing after somebody's approval and you never seem to get it because they always have higher standards. And that's sort of what he does to her with Jane Fairfax. He always has this higher standard, but she doesn't she does not let him get her down. She does not obsess over his opinion. She wins his love by being her own person. And overall, it's a story that we can endorse. It's a story that we can get behind. I think people who just look at it and see him as a bossy, condescending mansplainer do not understand the characteristics that she has that ultimately make them come together as equals.
Right. Well, this is a good segue, actually, into our first viewer question.
Oh, yeah.
That my friend Wendy left on our Facebook page, which we talked a bit about in our previous episode. But her question was, how do I like Emma as a character? Meaning, how can I get over her selfishness and her narcissism and her being rude to people, Miss Bates being a good example. So how do I come to like Emma as a character? And I think, why are you winking at me, Kristen?
Oh, sorry, I said it in my eye. Why should I be winking at my own podcasting partner, say? Okay.
So the question is, how can you reconcile Emma's kind of flaws and come to like her? And I think that if you go back and read the book again, I think it's easy to kind of paint Emma into a corner as the mean girl, as we've talked about. But I think as we've shown through our discussion these past 2 episodes, there is a lot of facets of her character that are not negative. I think I don't think we mentioned this, but she goes regularly to the poor people in the area and brings them food and cares for them when they're ill. And she takes Harriet with her during one of the visits, and she cares for her father, and she loves her friends, and I think she would do anything for her friends. And I think there's actually a lot about Emma that's likable.
Faultless in spite of her faults, Mr. Knightley says, or thinks anyway.
And I tend to think that Mr. Knightley is actually too hard on her.
Yeah.
She was only 21, right? When I was
Right.
21, I was a mess.
I know.
So Emma's,
Yeah.
she runs that house. She and Mr. Knightley basically run the whole estate for her father.
Yes.
I mean, I think Emma has actually got a lot of things that are very positive in her personality.
She's extremely mature for her age, especially having been raised with, by a woman who always indulged her and a father who always indulged her.
Right. So it's almost like we're lucky she turned out as well as she did. And if she does tend to indulge her selfishness and her wanting to be liked and things like that, she is 21. I mean, come on.
Who can't relate to that?
Right. So I think that it can be difficult to like Emma as a character at first blush, but on a closer reading, and I think if you go back and reread, I think that you can really see the good parts of her character. They really shine through, especially by the end.
You do have to look, but they are there. Austen gave us a solid foundation for her. It's just that people like me, who are always the super shy, nerdy girl getting picked on, don't have a whole lot of sympathy, patience.
Yeah, I don't know. It's hard to have sympathy for. I mean, Austen tells you in the first sentence of the book.
Yeah.
Handsome, she's rich.
Clever, and rich.
She's got everything going for her, right?
Oh, man.
We're already predisposed to be like, what a bitch.
That's the way Jane Fairfax thinks about her, too.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. But then even later in the book, Emma really regrets not being closer friends with her, which I thought was a really mature thing to realize.
Yes. Exactly. She has the fundamentals are there.
Right.
She's just learning to course correct her own. And, we don't see that, with a whole lot of other Austen heroines, but it is true that you're young and dumb and you do make mistakes. And,
right.
And
when Frank Churchill comes in, he definitely kind of brings out her less positive qualities. And we've talked about that too, how sometimes you get around people where you can just kind of be a total jerk with, and that's fun, but they may not be necessarily the best people for you to hang out with and show your good qualities, because they basically just sit around and, talk smack about people and are jerks.
Yeah, they love it.
Yeah, it's the best. My Kristen and I are friends. I'm her Frank Churchill. So thank you for your question, Wendy. We'll encourage everyone to send us questions. You can either send them to our First Impressions Facebook page or our email, which Kristen will let you know what it is.
It's firstimpressionspodcast@gmail.com.
So please send us questions, and we have a special guest coming up for our next episode, which we're very excited about. We'll just hint at it now. What other old business do we have? We needed to tell people what we've been drinking tonight.
I'm drinking another Idaho wine from Koenig Vineyards.
Oh, Lord. My bottle has absconded to the other room. Oh, here it is. Thank you. I have been drinking this fabulous bottle of champagne. It's called Pommery. It is a product of France. It was a birthday gift from my wonderful friend Kim, who is one of my jazzercise instructors, who is amazing. So thank you, Kim. I did not drink it my birthday weekend. I saved it for another special occasion, and I thought tonight would be a lovely time to drink it. It was delicious, not too dry. I very much recommend it. Do we have any other old business, Kristen?
No, I don't think so. This podcast has gone on for 2 hours.
Really? We went for 2 hours?
Yeah, because we started at 7:30. Anyway.
Well, you know why?
Why?
Because there is a lot to take out. There's going to be a lot to edit out of this podcast, let me tell you.
Oh, yeah. Oh, my God. It's going to be such hard work. All right.
No, we appreciate it. Everyone. So I just want to lay out right here for everyone, and I don't know if Kristen will leave this in, but I just want to say, Kristen does all the work of this podcast. She comes up with the topics we're going to, have another drink, Kristen. She comes up with the topics we're going to talk about. She writes outlines. She obviously has an encyclopedic knowledge of Jane Austen's books. She edits everything. She spends hours upon hours improving the sound quality and editing it. And I basically just show up and make a bunch of stupid jokes.
She brings the funny. That's the reason everybody listens, is because
no, I don't think that's true. I don't think that's true. I think that people listen because they like hearing actual literary discussion, which you provide, and hopefully I can provide some funny comments. But I think that
you've also made some
do all the hard work, and so I just want everyone to know that I am extremely grateful for all the hard work that you put in on this.
Thank you so much. And you have made, don't undersell yourself, because you have made some very insightful points too.
Oh, well, thank you, Kristen.
Arnie will be with us next time to drop the knowledge. So
yes. Get ready, listeners. Get ready. This is our special guest. He is what is it? Like the BDF, like big deal fan.
Yeah.
That's the like nice way of putting it without the profanity. In the Jane Austen community, we are very excited for our next episode to have a special guest who is. He has some really, really great sort of not in the mainstream theories.
Yeah,
so it's going to be fun.
Pushing the community. I think he's really pushing the community to open their minds and take a look at some things. And there are things that he has told me that now that I have seen them, I cannot unsee them. And
what has been seen cannot be unseen. Yeah.
I'll just give you this taster, listeners. The name Jane Fairfax is repeated ad nauseum in Emma, to the point where it's almost fetishized. Why don't they just call her Miss Fairfax? And also, Jane is the name of Elizabeth Bennet's older sister. So I wrote to Arnie and I was like, why did she give not one but two characters her own name? As an author, you're doing that. You're doing that for a reason. I feel like you'd have to be doing that for a reason. Otherwise, it'd be weird. Yeah. And so he was like, Kristen, call me.
So Kristen picks up like her red phone that connects directly to Arnie.
Yeah, the Arnie phone. And he blew my mind, and now I can never unsee the things that he said, and they're fascinating, and there's theory, and I think that there are a lot of things that work with it. Anyway, and we were talking about this book among the Janeites, and we did praise it, and there overall it is worth reading, but Arnie is discussed in that book, and he is discussed that the author is not generous to Arnie. She takes a very dim view of him, and I think she does him a disservice. Mm-hmm. I think she is not open to the fact that, he's done a lot of research and is worth respect as a person.
Right. So we're going to give him his forum.
Yes, we are. We're going to give him
explain his theories. And perhaps if there is any kind of advanced reading or something that Kristen can recommend that our more obsessive listeners might want to look at or read before listening to the episode, we can share that on our Facebook page.
Absolutely.
I'm sure that he has many articles that he has written.
Oh, yes.
Many.
Oh, yes. There's a blog. Yes, the Sharp Elves Society. I will share it on Facebook.
Definitely share a link to that.
Yeah,
for people to read. Well, so we're very excited. So this will be our Emma Part 3 coming up, because we are going to be talking to Arnie in the context of Emma. And I'm super excited to talk to him, by the way. Kristen and he have had a relationship, friendship for several years, I believe.
That's right.
Yeah, but I have actually never met him, never talked to him, so I am really excited to talk to him and hear his ideas and his theories. I'm really ridiculously excited for it.
Yay! So on that note, we'll go ahead and say goodbye, listeners, and
bye, everyone.
All right.
Thanks for listening.
Thanks for listening.